Marcus had a tough time pulling in his net. He had caught something big that was thrashing around wildly. He had never caught anything this large before, so he was thrilled to find out what it was. But his excitement quickly turned to confusion when he saw that the creature in his net didn't look like a fish at all. Marcus jumped into action, eager to help the animal, but one question lingered. What could it be? Marcus, who wanted to be a fisherman, was out on his boat to practice throwing his net. He was learning from his father and wanted to make him proud. So, on his days off, he often sailed alone like he was doing today. Little did he know, he was about to catch something unexpected. The day was mostly calm with a few waves, making it perfect for sailing. Marcus loved being alone because it gave him time to focus on himself. He had thrown his net into the water in the morning, and by noon, it was time to check if he had caught anything. Slowly, he pulled in his net, always excited to see something flopping inside. But this time, he was disappointed to find nothing. Still hopeful, he tossed his net back into the sea, knowing that not every trip would be successful. He decided to sail further out to find a better spot. After about half an hour, he was far from shore, with not many boats around. While waiting, Marcus passed the time by reading a book in the sun. Suddenly, he heard a strange splashing sound coming from one of his nets. He quickly stood up and looked over the side of the boat, but the animal was thrashing around so much that he couldn't see what it was. All he could tell was that it was very big. There was no time to waste, so Marcus jumped into action. He tried to pull the net out of the water, but it was much too heavy. He had never caught anything this big before and struggled to lift it. Finally, he managed to get the net close to the edge of the water and looked over the side again. He hoped he wasn't pulling a shark onto his boat, as that seemed like the only explanation for its size and weight. But what he discovered was that it wasn't a fish at all. Excitedly, Marcus looked over the railing, but his excitement quickly faded at the sight of the strange animal. He had to do a double take, as he had no idea what he was looking at. It kind of looked like a wet wool sweater, but that couldn't have made the splashing sound. Suddenly, the wet clump of fur began to move, and two big eyes looked up at Marcus. His eyes widened in shock as he realized what he had caught. What in the world? Marcus stammered to himself. He ran to the end of the net's rope and began to pull again. This animal didn't belong in the water. As he tried to pull the animal onto his boat, it began to move around again, swinging the net from side to side. This made Marcus's job even harder as the animal kept getting stuck behind his fender. The wet fur was probably the reason why the animal was so heavy. So when Marcus failed to get the animal onto his boat, he had to change tactics. Marcus decided to let the animal air dry inside the net for a bit. It was hovering above the water, so as long as it didn't manage to escape the net, it wouldn't get wet again. Every 10 minutes, Marcus would check on the animal, and slowly, he watched its fur change into a lighter, drier color. After about 30 minutes, he tried to pull the animal on board again, and this time, he had it much easier. Finally, the animal fell onto the deck, frozen in shock. It looked around, trembling in fear, and appeared exhausted. Marcus filled a small bowl with fresh drinking water. The animal was still stuck in the net, but Marcus decided to keep it that way so it wouldn't be able to escape. As he observed the animal, which was now drinking the fresh water Marcus had provided, he noticed how much it looked like a cat. But what was it doing so far from shore? Marcus decided he had to sail back to shore to get the animal checked by a veterinarian. Being in the salty water for so long wasn't good for anyone, and the animal could have internal damage. He turned his boat around and began his route back, turning his attention away from the animal. When the shore was almost in sight, Marcus turned around to check on the animal. To his surprise, the net was empty. Marcus's heart sank. Where could the animal be? He ran to the back of the boat to check the water around him, but there was no sign of the cat. Splashing around anywhere, it had to be somewhere on his boat still. But where? Marcus quickly ran back to the helm of his boat and dropped his anchor. He had to find the animal before he could dock the boat, as he was afraid it would run away as soon as land was in sight. Marcus looked everywhere inside his boat, from the sleeping area to the bathroom, but the animal was nowhere to be seen. Lastly, he suddenly realized there was a cooler he kept on deck to keep the fish he caught cool and fresh on his journey back. If this animal were a cat, then that place would be perfect to hide in. After making sure the cat was locked up, he continued his journey to shore. There, he docked his boat and called a nearby veterinarian clinic. He explained what had happened and asked if he should bring the animal in. The vet made sure Marcus knew how important it was for the cat to get a checkup, so Marcus knew he had no other choice. But the true question was, how would he get the animal to the vet? He could transport it while it was still inside the cooler, but there was no ventilation, so that wouldn't be responsible. There was also one more problem. Marcus didn't have a car. He had spent all his money on his sailboat. He decided transporting the cat inside a crate was the best option, as the wooden slats had air gaps between them. Marcus quickly rummaged through his boat for an old fishing crate, emptying its contents onto the ground. He grabbed a can of tuna from his fridge and placed it inside the crate. Setting the crate in front of his bathroom door, he slowly opened it. It didn't take long for the curious cat to follow its nose and step inside. Marcus swiftly covered the crate with a piece of netting and tied it securely with rope to keep the cat from escaping during the trip. As he walked to his bike, many people stared, clearly puzzled by a fisherman transporting a cat in a crate. Marcus recognized it was an unusual sight, but he had to focus and get to the vet quickly. He placed the crate on the back of his bike, only to realize he had nothing to secure it. The only way to transport the cat was to walk beside his bike, holding onto the crate, which would take about 30 minutes. He needed a better solution. Suddenly, someone called out, "Sam, what are you doing?" It was his father. "I need your help, Dad," Marcus shouted, pointing to the crate on his bike. His father owned the car, so Marcus hoped he could give them a ride to the vet. "What do you have there?" his father asked, raising an eyebrow. "You won't believe what I caught in my net today," Marcus replied, a grin on his face. "A cat." He laughed at the confusion on his father's face. "I know it sounds crazy, but I need to get it to the vet. Can you help?" Together, they drove to the vet. When the vet examined the cat, he gasped in shock. "You found this animal in the sea? This isn't a cat, it's a lynx." Marcus was stunned. Lynxes didn't live in this area. Tears filled his eyes as he realized the truth. The lynx must have been smuggled across the sea and escaped, struggling to survive. If he hadn't found it, it might not have made it. Thankfully, he had been there to help. The lynx was taken to a sanctuary for monitoring until it regained strength. Afterward, it was returned to its homeland and set free. As Marcus continued to fish, he was reminded of how unpredictable life could be. He cast his net again, hopeful for another catch, but came up empty. Disappointed but undeterred, he threw his net back into the sea, knowing that not every trip would be successful.